The Senate bill that just passed may be fighting a war that's already over. Um, I'm going to talk about that. There's an article that came out that I wanted to address. I'm also going to talk about a client of mine who, do you remember October of 2022 when home prices, well, excuse me, home interest rates had skyrocketed and everybody's like, oh my gosh, don't buy anything. I had a client that actually discovered $43,000 because they bought at that time. I'm going to talk about that. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about foreign income. I just tried to rescue a deal for a family who nearly lost their life savings because somebody didn't do their homework. And so I'm going to talk about that as well. But let me go ahead and first start with this article that I was talking about. It is man, well, I guess hi. Let me not just jump straight into it, but let me first wish you hello and thank you for joining me. I'm Josh Thomas, mortgage broker in the state of Utah, helping Utah families become financially powerful enough to pay their houses off in half the time. That is stuff that we love helping clients do. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as soon as I can figure out which one it is. And then we can kind of look at this article together. So Senate passes sweeping housing package 89 to 10. That is a slam dunk. But man, why? What is this? So there's two parts to this bill, and actually the second part is the part you're probably less aware of, is the one that I want to speak most to. But this one is including information about banning big time investors who are purchasing 350 or more homes. This bill is meant to limit what they can do and put certain restrictions on that. The irony to that is that nobody should care. So I remember hearing about this, I think all the way back in like 2022 or three. And institutional investors represent, they're a chunk of the marketplace, but it's a pretty small chunk. We're talking like 5%, maybe 10% of the market. If you go back to like 2021, 2020, they were like 10% of the market, which that's sizable. That is a lot of buyers. And so that level of demand would then disappear because they've got different restrictions on them now. But lately it's only been like 5%, and that's still a chunk of homes, but it's not a very big chunk. And so I'm not 100% sure that I understand why that's important. To begin with. It sounds cool in the headlines, ban the institutional investor from, getting rich on us and driving up house prices. But guys, it's just like so many of these headlines, it just doesn't really pertain. It's just not accurate. It's just a headline. But I did want to point out that, as you can see, I've kind of highlighted this. This bill is not law yet. It still has to go back to the House now for consideration, which I'm sure it'll change. And then it's got to go to President Trump before it becomes law. But man, the issue that I have with this whole thing is they're actually trying to create more supply. Has anyone listening to this? Have you heard that we have a housing shortage? Have you heard that phrase? And are you thinking that we have a housing shortage? If you haven't answered that question, you're still just listening, then I'm going to encourage you to pause me for a second and answer that question. Do we have a housing shortage? And if you answer yes, then keep listening because we don't. We don't have a housing shortage. We did, but we don't now. And to be honest, the housing shortage, I don't know that I would say it was a shortage as much as rates were so dang low that it drew a bunch of demand from people that wouldn't normally be buying homes for years to come. It drew them forward. And so 2022, 2023, 2024 naturally would have a segment of home buyers that would come into the marketplace. But because rates were so low, a lot of those segments moved forward into 2020 and 2021, creating so much more demand that home prices flew up. But if you understand, of course, 2022, which is that, remember I was going to address that. I have a client that found 43 grand. So we'll come to that here in just a moment. But it's just really exciting to interesting to recognize that's the reason home prices went up. That's the reason we had a housing shortage, was simply because the rates were so low. So as soon as the rates went up, you found that the market's been pretty balanced. We've been averaging, 2-3% appreciation year over year for the last 4 years. In some moments, it's been kind of flat. And in fact, most of 2022, it was really flat, even went down a little bit. But 2023 kind of came back up, rebounded a little bit. 2024, same thing. 25, same thing. 2025, it looks like from all the buyers that I've dealt with, we're somewhere right around a 2% price gain year over year. So here's the point. If it's only gaining at 1% or 2% or 3%, that's a balanced market, guys. That's just the cost of inflation. So if home prices go up 1, 2, 3%, that means that the buyers and sellers are pretty balanced, right? If it was going up 10%, okay, that's a housing shortage. If it was going down, that's an oversupply. That is why I have an issue with this, all this talk. So every time you hear anybody talking about a housing shortage right now, there isn't one. That was 4 years ago, guys. And so, like government so often does, they're late to the party. This bill doesn't need to exist. It may open up the building process and it may drive costs down for building a little tiny bit, but it's going to be such an insignificant amount that it certainly isn't worth all the time and effort that the Congress is putting into it. So I'm really booing all this housing stuff. We don't have a housing shortage, not on a state level, not on a national level. No government anywhere in the United States that I'm aware of should be involved in creating more housing supply anymore. We do not have that shortage anymore. Even rental properties, rental prices, as you guys know, I have rentals. The prices are not going up right now. I haven't changed my own rents hardly at all in the last couple of years. And so if rents aren't going up, house prices are barely going up at all. How do we have a shortage of any kind, guys? So um, that's what I wanted to share with you about as far as this article is concerned. Hopefully you find that useful, insightful. That's the whole reason I talk about it is because there's a lot of voices out there. I've been doing this for 23 years, fellas and ladies, and anyone else that's listening to this. I don't know everything, of course. In fact, I probably don't even know a fraction of any of it. But I do know enough to recognize we do not have a housing shortage anymore, and we do not need the government getting involved to create more supply because I promise you this, if we get too much supply, that pricing crash that that so many people have been, shouting for the last 15 years, that has not happened. Then we might see a price decline. And also recognize that in 2005, 6, 7, 8, part of the reason that the house prices went down in '08 was because we had an oversupply at that time. And for other reasons, we had some seriously irresponsible lending going on for sure. But that gave a lot of people homes that there just wasn't the demand for. So it kind of falsely created demand. Well, in this case, if the government is stimulating, hopefully they don't force the builders or overstimulate the builders because the builders are paying attention to demand and they are not going to overbuild. But if that changes and we have too much supply coming to market, you know, now we're going to see home prices decline. How much? I don't know. I don't see it right now, but if. So anyway, I also promised you that I would talk about this. Back in October of 2022, if you'll just kind of go back with me in time for a second, it was more like actually the kind of the tension of 2022. I didn't feel like it was like that. It wasn't like a, it was more like a, it was more like that, right? Do you remember 2022? Anybody in housing should probably respond the way I'm talking about, but anybody from 2020, anybody that's outside of housing, maybe you guys didn't feel that quite that same way, but interest rates went up to 4%. They were actually projected to go up to 4.75% in 2022. When I saw those reports come out, I laughed. I'm like, are you guys kidding me? These are smart economists that are saying that home price or interest rates were going to go up to 4.75. We were in the threes at that time, so I don't blame them for saying that. But guys, that was so far off the mark. There's nothing normal about a 4.75 interest rate. And the Federal Reserve not only was no longer stimulating, they were restricting the markets at that point. They were driving interest rates up through their interbank lending rates that they mess with. I knew interest rates were going up. I was telling people all 2022 we're going to see rates in the sixes, definitely. I didn't necessarily see them going to seven and even eight like we saw in the subsequent years, but I definitely saw the sixes. And so 2022, we had a lot of people that were kind of freaking out. By springtime, rates were definitely into the fours, but still pretty interesting. By summertime, we had made it to the high fives and I think even to the sixes. But definitely by fall, we made it to the sixes. So just kind of put yourself in that spot and listen to this story. This is a success story of a client of ours. We're closing right now. So this client was incredibly brave, crazy, who knows, whatever. But maybe back in 2022, somebody would even call him stupid or something like that. But they were brave and they thought buying a house made sense. Now, they weren't buying a house to make money, they were buying a house to live. That's why most of us buy houses, right? I mean, the money part's nice, but they were buying a house just because it was time for their family to own. They were tired of renting, right? And so they wanted to take advantage of the opportunities that were theirs, and they bought a house. And when they bought that house, I'm sure everybody and their dog told them they were crazy, but they bought that house in October 2022 with a 6.5% interest rate. And I'm sure they cried like everybody else. The C rates had gone to that level. And I have talked to this client at least 3 or 4 times since about refinancing, but we just haven't really had a great opportunity for him. Um, Last fall, 2025, there was a couple moments that I thought, okay, he's almost there. I was looking for a free refinance. Anybody that's my client knows that I'm looking for free refinances for him. And then 2024, we even had a moment, 3 weeks, where interest rates went down. And I remember looking at his loan then, and we had those conversations then, but there was never the free refinance available for him. And even this time, I have to admit, I kind of missed it for him this time. I looked over him again, but he called and reached out, and I was like, well, I don't really think you got an opportunity, but let me just go ahead and put some numbers together for you. And he didn't have the free refinance like I was always looking for. But what he did have is a 5.5 that was available. It's a 1.1% drop for him. It did have some closing costs on it, about $9,000 of closing costs. Now his loan amount is about 430, so about 2% in closing costs roughly. But for him, this made sense because he's going to be dropping 387 bucks a month off of his monthly payment. And that 387 versus the 9,300 in cost, it's about 24 months. This is a long-term hold for them. They're going to live in it for probably at least another year or two, maybe three, but they're hoping to keep it permanently as a rental. And so for them, this is a great opportunity. Well, anyway, that's these clients, right? And what's this $43,000 that they found? What am I talking about? Well, when they bought the house in October of 2022, it was what was it? 472, 472,000. When we just did their refinance and we just appraised it for them, it was 515,000. So if I did my math correctly, that is about $43,000. Now keep in mind that it was a mistake. They were crazy. What are they thinking buying in October of 2022? And yet today, besides having paid their loan back for 3.5 years, besides having saved some interest of that 6.5, some of it was tax favored. Besides them owning a home of their own with all of the perks that comes with it, that they can paint it whatever color and have dogs or cats or whatever they want, do whatever they want, and nobody else cares. Besides all those benefits, the house has increased in value 43 grand over that length of time as well, which is an average of about 2.5% a year. So it's not crazy, crazy growth, but it certainly isn't a loss. Their house price certainly didn't crash. So how cool is that, right? And somebody was smart enough and brave enough to venture out into that market, and they bought, and look how it's rewarding them. So I wanted to share that story. It was super fun and cool to be able to participate with them in that. Um, yeah, so you should comment with some hoorays or whatever you want to call it. And let's see one of these. See if I can do this. Does this work on this screen? Um, or if I do this, I see if this comes across. Yeah. Yeah. So you guys should comment some of those for me. I wonder if I can do this one when it comes to the comments I had earlier. Let's see if I can do this one. Do you remember the article I was reading at the beginning of this? Yeah, let's not vote for more housing supply. I just realized I can do this kind of goofy stuff. Anyway, okay, back to back to the fun stuff here. All right, so my last one that I've talked about, the last story that I led in with is I just tried to rescue a deal where a family almost lost their life savings because their lender didn't understand how foreign income works. Guys, 23 years doing this. Early in my career, there's a couple times I made a mistake, and my client was at risk. And I remember talking to some other loan officer out there who'd been doing it for 20 plus years and walked me through my file, and they found all the flaws that I'd missed because I hadn't been doing it for very long. It was really, really embarrassing and hard. But this particular loan officer has been doing it for 30 years. That's longer than me. Um, well, in this particular situation, these guys, one of them lives in Hong Kong. They are buying a house here in Utah, but they live and work out of Hong Kong. And if you ask how that works, it's because they're not planning on living in the house. Their kid is, and so it's what we call a kitty condo or just, a non-occupant cosigner. But foreign income, this person lives and works outside the US. They're a citizen of the US, so it's not too crazy stuff, and it's a very lucrative position. They're in a very good spot. However, foreign income. What is foreign income? What is that? How do you count that? Now, this isn't something that comes up very often, so I'll be honest, I had to read the guidelines myself, but this is how it reads. So FHA and Fannie Mae, again, if you're a veteran in the US military or if you're buying in a USDA approved area, then maybe we'll talk about one of those two loans. But in this case, we're talking about FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. FHA requires that you report 2 years of foreign income on your tax return in order to document and count that income. So that means that you have to make money there and pay taxes here. And if you don't, we can't count it, guys, like at all. We had, so that's FHA, Fannie Mae, same rule, almost identical rule. Freddie Mac has 1 year. They only require it be on your tax return for 1 year. Now, this is where the other lender thought that, okay, this is why. And if you go into the rules, it says 1 year tax return, but there's no real definition like, do they have to work the whole year overseas in order to be able to count this income? And so we had to dig in a little deeper to find that out and contact Fannie Mae, or excuse me, Freddie Mac in order to find that out. But the answer is yes, you do. You have to have a full 12 months income in order to count that income. And so this client, they just started last fall, so they did not have the history. Now, this is why I brought this up. Number one, we were trying to help rescue it. And so that means they were already under contract. They were already supposed to close. Their deadlines were already expiring. They'd already spent money on an appraisal. However, um, I couldn't rescue it, guys. It wasn't an option. They were putting 10% down. They weren't trying to put more than that. They were putting 20% or more down or had that to put down. Then we have a couple other loan options that might work out for them. But in this particular case, we couldn't go through Freddie Mac because we didn't have a full 12 months of foreign income. And so this is stuff that we find out when we get our clients pre-approved. So when somebody applies before they ever go out shopping, once you go shopping, it gets pretty ugly, right? And so, um, shopping for a home before your lender vets your foreign income is like driving a car without brakes. It will go, but you won't like where it stops. So we've always pre-approved our clients. I don't know always, but at least a solid 10 years or better. We have done everything we can do up front to find any problem we're going to find and to solve that problem before we even give you a pre-approval letter and send you shopping. I feel like that's a big service to you. My side of the world, I have to pay $100 to pull your credit. I may pay 100 or 200 bucks to pull your income reports and maybe your asset reports. And these go into a software system that we run it all and we get some kind of kickback. But then I'm going to go through and read these documents myself and compare them to what the rules state in these different guidelines because I don't want some bank later on to find out that you can't close, not on my watch. And so when I pre-approve my clients, you can count on it. It's good as gold. In this client, I would never have given them a pre-approval letter. They didn't pass, right? I started the loan, I want to say, was it Wednesday, Thursday? And by Saturday, I was crystal clear we weren't going to be able to do it. So if we're going to approve your loan, we're going to approve it pretty quickly, but thoroughly. If we're going to decline your loan, we're also going to try to get there very quickly. So in the end, make sure that your all the homework gets done. If you're a lender watching this, do your homework, take good care of your clients. If it's a loan that you aren't doing frequently, foreign income doesn't often come up that it doesn't come up that often. And so more than likely this lender hadn't done foreign income in at least in the last year. Well, if it's anything new that you're not super familiar with because you didn't just do it again last week, it's time to go into those rules and read them carefully. It was right there in black and white. It wasn't too hard to find. So that's the moral of the story. If you're a lender, if you're a client, give us a call. We'll get you pre-approved and you can count on it. You can bank on it. Outside of that, uh, probably not a whole lot else to tell you. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Hope you're having a great workout, great drive home, or a great drive to work. And man, just make it a great day. Thanks for tuning in. You guys have a wonderful rest of your whatever moment is that you're sharing with me. Talk to you later.